The day started like any other at the bustling international airport. Travelers hurried through the terminal, dragging suitcases and clutching boarding passes. Among them was Maya, a bright-eyed 16-year-old with dreams of seeing the world. Today marked her first-ever flight, and she couldn't contain her excitement. Her destination? A warm, faraway country where her grandparents eagerly awaited her arrival. Clutching her passport and ticket tightly in hand, Maya felt a mix of nerves and anticipation as she joined the long line for security checks. Maya stood out, not because of anything unusual about her appearance, but because of her quiet confidence. She wore a simple hoodie, jeans, and sneakers, her braids tied neatly into a ponytail. People around her chatted animatedly or scrolled through their phones, but Maya seemed lost in thought, rehearsing what she'd say to her grandparents when she finally saw them. She imagined their hugs, the smell of home-cooked meals, and the stories they'd share under the stars. It was all so close now, but not everyone shared Maya's optimism. Just moments before her turn at the gate, Officer Greg Harris arrived on duty. Known throughout the airport for his stern demeanor and no-nonsense attitude, Harris had built a reputation for being tough. Some might even say too tough. His piercing eyes scanned the crowd, always searching for someone who didn't fit. To him, airports were battlegrounds where danger lurked behind every smile, and he prided himself on rooting it out. As Maya approached the front of the line, Harris locked his gaze on her. Something about her made him pause. Was it her youthful energy? Or perhaps the way she clutched her documents as though they were treasures? Whatever it was, Harris decided she needed closer inspection. Without hesitation, he stepped forward, cutting off her path to the gate. Passengers behind her shifted uncomfortably, sensing tension in the air. "Excuse me, miss," Harris barked, his voice sharp enough to startle those nearby. "Step aside. We need to have a word." Maya blinked, caught off guard. "Is there a problem?" she asked politely, her voice steady despite the knot forming in her stomach. Harris ignored her question, waving her over to a corner away from the crowd. For a moment, Maya hesitated, unsure if this was standard procedure. But then she reminded herself that she hadn't done anything wrong. Surely this would be resolved quickly and she could continue on her journey. Little did she know this encounter would spiral into something much bigger than either of them anticipated. Meanwhile, passengers whispered among themselves, some shaking their heads in disapproval while others simply looked away. No one dared intervene. The hum of rolling luggage and distant announcements filled the background, contrasting sharply with the tense scene unfolding before them. And as Maya followed Harris reluctantly, she couldn't shake the sinking feeling that this wasn't going to end well. Officer Harris wasted no time getting to the heart of what he clearly believed was an issue. He stood with his arms crossed, towering over Maya as she nervously held onto her ticket and passport. His tone was sharp, almost accusatory, as if he had already decided she was guilty of something before even asking a single question. "You sure this is your ticket?" he asked, snatching the boarding pass from her hand without waiting for permission. Maya flinched at his abruptness, but nodded firmly, trying to keep her voice steady. "Yes, sir," she replied. "It's mine. I'm flying to visit my grandparents." Harris barely glanced at the ticket before tossing it back onto the counter. "And this ID. Whose picture is this?" he demanded, pointing at her passport photo. Maya stared at him in disbelief. The photo was unmistakably hers, taken just months ago when she applied for the document. "It's me," she said, her patience beginning to wear thin. "That's my passport. Everything is correct." But Harris wasn't satisfied. He leaned closer, his eyes narrowing as though searching for some hidden clue on her face. "You don't look like someone who travels internationally," he muttered under his breath, loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. Some shifted uncomfortably, exchanging glances while others pretended not to notice. Maya felt her cheeks grow warm, embarrassment creeping in. She had done nothing wrong, yet here she was being treated like a criminal. "I've never flown before," she admitted softly, hoping honesty might ease the situation. "This is my first trip." Instead of softening, Harris grew more suspicious. "First trip? Out of the country? At your age? He shook his head, muttering again about how unusual it all seemed. To him, every detail about Maya, from her youthful appearance to her modest clothing, felt like a red flag. Never mind that thousands of teenagers traveled alone every day. In his mind, there was something off about her. The minutes dragged on as Harris peppered her with questions. Where were her parents? Why weren't they traveling with her? Did she have proof of where she was staying? Each answer Maya gave seemed to fuel his skepticism rather than resolve it. Passengers waiting in line began to murmur among themselves, some rolling their eyes at the delay, others shaking their heads in frustration. One woman loudly whispered, "This is ridiculous," earning a glare from Harris but saying nothing further. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Harris made his decision. "I'm sorry," he announced, though his tone suggested anything but regret. "You're not getting on this flight." Maya's heart sank. "What? Why?" she stammered, panic rising in her chest. "I have my ticket, my passport, it's all here. What did I do wrong?" Harris didn't answer directly. Instead, he turned to the gate agent and instructed them to remove her name from the passenger list. Then, without another word, he walked away, leaving Maya standing there in stunned silence. Her hands trembled as she clutched her documents, tears welling up in her eyes. The other passengers watched helplessly as she was left stranded, unsure of what to do next. For Maya, the world suddenly felt smaller and colder. All her excitement and anticipation had been crushed in an instant by a man who refused to see her as anything more than a stereotype. And as she stood there, abandoned and humiliated, one thought kept running through her mind. Why me? Little. Did she know? This was only the beginning of a chain reaction that would soon spiral far beyond the confines of the airport terminal. As Maya stood stranded at the gate, her mind raced with confusion and anger. She couldn't understand why Officer Harris had singled her out, or what she could have possibly done to deserve such treatment. Passengers moved around her, some offering sympathetic glances while others avoided eye contact altogether. The bustling energy of the airport seemed to blur into the background as Maya tried to process what had just happened. Her dream trip, her first flight, had been ripped away in a matter of minutes, leaving her feeling powerless and invisible. Unbeknownst to Maya, however, someone was already on the case. Across the country, Evelyn Carter, Maya's aunt, sat in her sleek office scrolling through emails when her phone buzzed insistently. It was a call from Maya's mother, frantic and near tears. "Evelyn, something's wrong," she said, her voice trembling. "Maya didn't make it onto the plane, and no one will tell us why." Evelyn frowned, setting down her pen. At 42, she carried herself with an air of authority that commanded respect. A high-ranking operative within the CIA, she was used to handling crises both big and small. But this wasn't just another problem. It was personal. Maya was family, and if anyone dared mistreat her niece, there would be consequences. "What do you mean she didn't board?" Evelyn asked sharply, her tone shifting instantly from calm professionalism to protective urgency. "She was stopped by security," Maya's mom explained, relaying the details Maya had shared over text. "Some officer wouldn't let her get on the plane, even though she had everything she needed." "They humiliated her, Evelyn. What are we supposed to do?" Evelyn's jaw tightened. This wasn't just about Maya being denied boarding. It was about someone abusing their power and targeting a young girl for no reason. She knew how these situations often played out. People in positions of authority making snap judgments based on appearances rather than facts. And Evelyn wasn't about to let that slide. Not today, not ever. "I'll handle it," Evelyn said firmly, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "Tell Maya to stay put. Don't let her leave the airport until I get there." Hanging up, Evelyn grabbed her coat and keys, her mind already working overtime. She made a quick call to her assistant, instructing him to pull up any available information on the airport and its staff. Then she sent Maya a brief but reassuring text. "Stay strong. I'm coming." The drive to the airport gave Evelyn time to think and to plan. She knew exactly who she was dealing with. Bureaucrats more concerned with avoiding scandal than doing the right thing. But Evelyn had spent years navigating complex systems and challenging those who thought they were untouchable. If anyone could fix this mess, it was her. When she arrived at the terminal less than an hour later, Evelyn wasted no time. Dressed in a crisp navy blue suit, her presence commanded attention the moment she stepped inside. Airport employees glanced up from their desks, recognizing immediately that this woman meant business. Evelyn scanned the area until she spotted Maya sitting alone on a bench, clutching her belongings tightly. The sight of her niece's defeated expression ignited a fire within her. Walking over, Evelyn placed a comforting hand on Maya's shoulder. "Are you okay?" she asked gently. Her voice softening for the first time since the call. Maya nodded weakly, though her red-rimmed eyes told a different story. "They won't let me fly," Maya whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't know what I did wrong." "You didn't do anything wrong," Evelyn assured her, her tone firm now. "But I promise you this isn't over." With that, Evelyn turned toward the nearest airport official, ready to demand answers. Behind them, passengers watched curiously, sensing that something significant was about to unfold. For Maya, hope flickered faintly, but it was enough to keep her going. Whatever came next, she wouldn't face it alone. Evelyn didn't waste a second. With Maya by her side, she marched straight toward the gate where Officer Harris had caused the disruption. Her sharp eyes scanned the area until they landed on him, still standing near the boarding line, clipboard in hand, as though nothing out of the ordinary had happened. Evelyn approached him with purpose, her heels clicking against the tiled floor, drawing attention from passengers and staff alike. "Officer Harris," she began, her voice calm but laced with authority. When he turned to face her, his expression shifted from mild curiosity to guarded suspicion. "I'm Evelyn Carter. This is my niece, Maya." She gestured to Maya, who stood slightly behind her, clutching her documents tightly. "Can you explain why you refused to let her board her flight?" Harris hesitated for a split second before recovering his composure. He straightened his posture, clearly trying to assert dominance. "Ma'am, I was following standard security protocols," he said, his tone clipped. "There were concerns about her identification and travel authorization." Evelyn raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. "Concerns? Care to elaborate? Because everything appears to be in order here." She held up Maya's passport and ticket, both perfectly valid. "Unless there's something specific you're alleging, it seems like this was unnecessary." Harris bristled at her challenge. "Look, ma'am, I've been doing this job for years. I know what I'm doing. Your niece didn't seem to fit the profile of a typical traveler, and I had to act accordingly." "The profile?" Evelyn repeated, her voice dropping dangerously low. The phrase hung in the air, heavy with implication. Passengers nearby slowed their pace, pretending to check their phones while eavesdropping on the escalating confrontation. Even airport employees paused, sensing that this exchange was about to spiral into something bigger. "That's not how security works," Evelyn continued, her words measured but biting. "You don't get to decide someone doesn't fit based on your personal biases. Do you have any evidence that suggests Maya posed a threat? Anything at all?" Harris faltered, his confidence wavering under Evelyn's relentless scrutiny. "It's not just one thing. It's patterns," he muttered defensively. "She's young, traveling alone, international destination. People like that raise flags." "People like that?" Evelyn echoed, her voice rising slightly now. Heads turned as the tension grew palpable. "Are you saying her age, race, or appearance gave you cause to detain her? Because if that's the case, we need to have a serious conversation about discrimination and accountability." Sensing the growing audience, Harris tried to backtrack. "Listen, I was just doing my job. If I made a mistake, I'll take responsibility, but—" "A mistake?" Evelyn interrupted, cutting him off. "This wasn't a simple error. You humiliated a child in front of dozens of people without justification. That's not acceptable. Officer Harris, not today, not ever." By now, the scene had drawn a small crowd. Phones emerged, capturing videos of the heated exchange. Someone whispered, "Is she CIA?" Another replied, "Looks like it." The murmurs only fueled Evelyn's determination. She leaned in closer to Harris, lowering her voice so only he could hear. You may think you're untouchable, but trust me, this isn't over. Not by a long shot. Harris's face flushed red, a mix of anger and unease flashing across his features. For the first time, he seemed unsure of himself, but instead of backing down, he doubled down, crossing his arms defiantly. If you've got a problem, take it up with management. I was following procedure. Evelyn smiled thinly, a glint of steel in her eyes. Oh, don't worry, I plan to. With that, she turned away, signaling to Maya that they were leaving, for now. As they walked off, the crowd dispersed slowly, buzzing with speculation. Officer Harris stood frozen, realizing too late that he might have picked the wrong person to cross. And Evelyn? She already had a plan forming in her mind. A plan that would ensure justice was served no matter what it took. The fallout from the confrontation between Evelyn and Officer Harris spread quickly, like ripples in a pond. Within minutes, airport management was alerted to the growing scene at Gate 17. Passengers who had witnessed the heated exchange began posting videos online, captions filled with outrage. Officer refuses to let teen board plane, CIA gets involved. The hashtags Justice for Maya and the airport bias started trending almost instantly, sparking debates about racial profiling and abuse of power. Realizing the potential public relations nightmare, the airport's senior manager, a harried-looking man named Mr. Langley, rushed to intervene. He approached Evelyn and Maya, his face etched with forced calm but his eyes betraying panic. Ms. Carter, he began, extending a hand that Evelyn ignored. I understand there's been an incident. Please, let's discuss this privately. Evelyn didn't budge. Her arms were crossed, her expression unwavering. There's nothing private about what happened here today, she replied coolly. Your officer publicly humiliated my niece without cause, violating her rights and embarrassing your institution. This isn't just a personal matter, it's systemic, and I intend to address it fully. Langley swallowed hard, beads of sweat forming on his forehead. He glanced nervously at the crowd still milling around, many openly watching the drama unfold. Of course, we'll investigate thoroughly, he assured her, his voice trembling slightly. But perhaps we can resolve this discreetly, for everyone's sake. Evelyn's lips curled into a faint, humorless smile. Discreetly? She echoed. You mean sweep it under the rug? That's not how this works. Not anymore. Behind her, Maya remained quiet, observing the exchange with wide eyes. She had never seen her aunt so formidable, so unshakable. It was both intimidating and empowering to witness. Evelyn's presence seemed to command respect or fear from everyone around them, including Officer Harris, who stood off to the side, visibly uncomfortable as whispers about him circulated among staff. Sensing he was losing control of the situation, Langley tried another tactic. If you'd like, we can offer compensation, a refund for the ticket, perhaps even a free flight in the future. This isn't about money, Evelyn snapped, cutting him off mid-sentence. It's about accountability, about ensuring that no one else has to go through what Maya did today because of someone's prejudice. If you're unwilling to take real action, then I'll make sure the world knows exactly what kind of operation you're running here. Langley paled, realizing he was dealing with someone far beyond his usual scope of complaints. Word had already reached him about Evelyn's connection to the CIA, though no one dared confirm it outright. Still, the mere possibility was enough to send shivers down his spine. He stammered, trying to salvage the situation. We'll launch a full investigation immediately. Officer Harris will be suspended pending review, and we'll implement additional training for our staff. I promise you, Ms. Carter, we take this seriously. Evelyn studied him for a long moment, her gaze piercing. Good, she said finally. But don't think this ends with a suspension or a few workshops. My team will be monitoring the situation closely. If I find any evidence of cover-ups or half-measures, trust me, you'll regret it. With that, she turned to Maya, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Let's get you home for now, she said softly, her tone softening for the first time since their arrival. Maya nodded, relief washing over her. Though the day had been exhausting, she felt a flicker of hope knowing her aunt was fighting for her. As they walked away, Langley hurriedly called a meeting with his senior staff, ordering damage control. Meanwhile, Officer Harris lingered near the gate, his confidence shattered. For the first time in his career, he felt vulnerable, unsure of what consequences awaited him. Little did he know, Evelyn's work was only beginning, and she had no intention of letting him off easily. The investigation into Officer Harris's actions moved swiftly, thanks in large part to Evelyn's relentless push for answers. Within hours of the incident, she had contacted colleagues within federal agencies and advocacy groups, ensuring that every possible resource was brought to bear. Surveillance footage from the airport was reviewed frame by frame, capturing not only Harris's interaction with Maya, but also his behavior toward other passengers earlier that day. What they uncovered painted a troubling picture. It turned out, this wasn't the first time Harris had acted on questionable instincts. The footage revealed several instances where he singled out travelers based on superficial traits, skin color, clothing style, or even body language. In one case, he detained a middle-aged woman wearing a hijab, interrogating her for over 20 minutes without cause. Another clip showed him aggressively questioning a college student carrying a backpack, accusing him of suspicious activity simply because he looked nervous. None of these individuals had broken any rules, yet Harris treated them as guilty until proven innocent. Evelyn compiled the evidence meticulously, presenting it to both airport officials and federal oversight committees. Her report highlighted not just Harris's discriminatory patterns, but also the broader culture of bias that allowed such behavior to persist unchecked. Social media outrage amplified her efforts, as more people shared stories of their own run-ins with Harris at the airport. Former co-workers came forward too, describing him as abrasive and quick to judge those who didn't fit his narrow definition of normal. Meanwhile, Officer Harris grew increasingly defensive. When called in for questioning by airport management, he doubled down on his story, insisting he'd done nothing wrong. "I was protecting national security," he argued, his voice rising with frustration. "You can't blame me for being cautious. If I hadn't stopped her and something happened later, you'd all be pointing fingers at me." But no one bought his excuses, not when faced with overwhelming evidence of misconduct. Even some of his fellow officers distanced themselves, unwilling to defend his actions publicly. Word spread among staff that Harris might lose his job entirely, leaving him isolated and bitter. He began lashing out, blaming everyone else for what he saw as unfair treatment. "This is ridiculous," he muttered during breaks, pacing angrily near the employee lounge. "They're making me the bad guy because of some teenager? She should have been more prepared if she wanted to fly." While Harris stewed in denial, Evelyn focused on turning the situation into an opportunity for change. She met with airport executives demanding systemic reforms to prevent similar incidents in the future. Mandatory bias training for all employees became non-negotiable. New protocols were introduced requiring supervisors to review detentions before removing passengers from flights. Transparency measures, including anonymous reporting systems for complaints, were implemented to hold staff accountable. Public pressure played a key role in pushing these changes forward. News outlets picked up the story, shining a spotlight on racial profiling in airports across the country. Advocacy groups praised Evelyn for standing up against injustice, using her platform to amplify marginalized voices. For Maya, watching her aunt fight so fiercely was both inspiring and validating. Though the ordeal had left emotional scars, she began to see herself as part of something bigger, a movement toward fairness and equality. As the days passed, it became clear that Officer Harris's career was unraveling. Suspended indefinitely and facing multiple lawsuits from past victims, he found himself ostracized by colleagues and vilified online. His attempts to justify his actions fell flat, drowned out by calls for accountability. And though justice felt slow to arrive, Maya knew one thing for certain: her voice mattered. and so did the voices of countless others who refused to stay silent in the face of prejudice. The final chapter of Officer Harris's downfall came sooner than anyone expected. Armed with Evelyn's detailed report and mounting public pressure, federal authorities launched a formal investigation into his conduct, not just at the airport, but throughout his career in law enforcement. It didn't take long for investigators to uncover a disturbing pattern of discriminatory behavior stretching back years. Incident reports, witness testimonies, and internal complaints painted a damning portrait of a man who had abused his power time and again. Harris was formally terminated from his position at the airport, a decision announced in a press release that made headlines nationwide. But losing his job was only the beginning. The lawsuits filed by individuals he had wrongfully detained began piling up, each case exposing new layers of misconduct. One plaintiff, a young father traveling with his toddler, recounted how Harris had accused him of smuggling contraband, simply because he carried a duffel bag. Another victim, an elderly woman visiting family abroad, described being strip-searched based on nothing more than Harris's vague suspicions. These stories shocked the public and further tarnished his reputation. For Maya, watching Harris face consequences brought a sense of vindication, but also lingering sadness. She couldn't forget the humiliation she'd endured or the fear that had gripped her as he dismissed her rights without hesitation. Sitting across from Evelyn one evening, she voiced her conflicted feelings. "I'm glad he's getting what he deserves," she admitted quietly, "but it doesn't erase what happened. I'll always remember how small he made me feel." Evelyn reached over, placing a comforting hand on hers. "You're allowed to feel however you want about this," she said gently. "What matters is that you stood your ground, and now you have a chance to make sure no one else goes through what you did. That's powerful, Maya." Inspired by her aunt's words, Maya decided to channel her experience into something meaningful. With Evelyn's encouragement, she began speaking out about racial profiling and systemic injustice, sharing her story at community forums and online platforms. Her courage resonated deeply with others who had faced similar discrimination, sparking conversations about accountability and reform. Schools invited her to speak to students, while advocacy groups sought her input on campaigns aimed at educating the public about bias in institutions like airports and law enforcement. Back at the airport, sweeping changes were implemented under close scrutiny from federal overseers. Bias training sessions became mandatory for all employees, led by experts who emphasized empathy and cultural awareness. New policies required multiple levels of approval before passengers could be removed from flights, ensuring decisions weren't left solely to individual officers. Anonymous feedback systems allowed travelers to report unfair treatment without fear of retaliation. Slowly but surely, the culture within the terminal shifted toward greater inclusivity and respect. As for Officer Harris, life after the scandal was bleak. Stripped of his badge and credibility, he struggled to find work in any field, let alone law enforcement. Friends and acquaintances distanced themselves, unwilling to associate with someone labeled a bigot in the court of public opinion. His name became synonymous with prejudice, a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked authority. Interviews with former colleagues revealed a man who had always been rigid and unyielding, traits that ultimately led to his undoing. Though justice had been served, Evelyn reminded Maya that the fight wasn't over. "This victory is important," she said, "but we can't stop here. Systems like these don't change overnight. It takes constant effort, constant vigilance." Maya nodded, understanding the weight of her aunt's words. She realized that while Harris's punishment marked a turning point, true progress would require ongoing advocacy, something she was ready to embrace. With newfound determination, Maya looked ahead to brighter days. Her trip to visit her grandparents was rescheduled, and this time, there were no obstacles at the gate. As she settled into her seat on the plane, gazing out the window at the runway below, she felt a quiet sense of triumph. The journey hadn't gone as planned, but it had taught her resilience, strength, and the importance of standing up for what's right. And as the plane soared into the sky, Maya knew she was ready to keep fighting, for herself and for others. The weeks that followed Maya's rescheduled flight brought a wave of transformation, not just in her life, but in the lives of countless others who had been inspired by her courage. As her story gained traction online and in the media, it sparked a national conversation about racial profiling and systemic bias. People from all walks of life shared their own experiences, flooding social media with hashtags like #MySureStandWithMaya and No More Bias. What started as one girl's fight for justice had grown into a movement, shining a light on issues many had long ignored. For Maya, stepping off the plane to reunite with her grandparents felt surreal. The warm embrace of family washed away some of the lingering tension she'd carried since the ordeal at the airport. Her grandparents, hearing every detail of what had happened, couldn't contain their pride. "You're stronger than you think," her grandmother said, hugging her tightly. "And now look, you've given people hope." Back home, Maya continued to use her voice to advocate for change. She partnered with organizations dedicated to combating discrimination, speaking at rallies and writing op-eds about the need for accountability in institutions like law enforcement and transportation security. Her message was simple yet powerful. Everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their race, age, or background. Schools invited her to share her journey with students, encouraging young people to stand up against injustice when they saw it. Meanwhile, the airport where it all began underwent a dramatic overhaul. Under federal oversight, new leadership took charge, prioritizing transparency and fairness. Employee training programs became more robust, focusing not only on identifying real threats but also on treating passengers with compassion and understanding. Travelers noticed the difference almost immediately. Interactions with staff felt less tense, more human. Anonymous surveys showed a sharp decline in complaints, proof that the reforms were working. Officer Harris, on the other hand, faded into obscurity. Unable to find steady employment and ostracized by those who once respected him, he spent his days isolated, grappling with the consequences of his actions. His name occasionally surfaced in news articles about racial profiling, always accompanied by criticism rather than praise. It was a stark reminder that power wielded carelessly could lead to ruin, a lesson he learned too late. Evelyn watched Maya's growth with quiet pride. Knowing she had played a role in helping her niece rise above adversity filled her with purpose. Though her work often kept her busy, she made time to mentor Maya, teaching her how to navigate activism while staying grounded. "Remember," Evelyn told her one evening, "change doesn't happen overnight. But every step forward matters, even the small ones." As months passed, Maya found herself dreaming bigger. Inspired by her aunt's career, she decided to pursue studies in political science, hoping to someday influence policy on a larger scale. For now, though, she focused on amplifying voices that had long gone unheard. Whether through speeches, interviews, or community workshops, she reminded audiences that no act of advocacy was too small. Every voice mattered, and together, they could create a world where stories like hers wouldn't repeat. When Maya finally returned to the same airport months later for another trip, she paused for a moment at the gate. This time there were no barriers, no suspicious glances or unwarranted questions, just smooth, respectful service. As she boarded her flight, she glanced back briefly, feeling a surge of gratitude for how far she'd come. The scars of the yaoi past hadn't disappeared entirely, but they had shaped her into someone stronger, braver, and more determined than ever. High above the clouds, Maya opened her journal and wrote a single line. "The sky isn't the limit, it's just the beginning." And as the plane soared onward, carrying her toward new adventures, she knew she was ready to face whatever lay ahead.